So first, I want to tell you about what I find shocking in the present state of society. Then I want to describe that. Then I want to put on my hat of a social theorist and try to explain how the heck did we get here? And then I want to end with what can we do about this? And how does the process of doing something about it work? And so that's the plan of the presentation that I've got for you today. Um, so I'm going to start with kind of a shopping list of things that are just absolutely shocking to me. And one of the first things is the degree to which our institutions in this democratic society have been captured. They are serving a hierarchy of power and control. They've been captured, whether they're hospitals or schools or universities, government agencies, the institutions have been captured. But the degree to which that is true, which ties in also to the degree to which professionals have lost professional independence. They just aren't behaving like responsible professionals who are supposed to be independent evaluators of facts in their area of expertise and giving good counsel both to politicians and the public. Where are the professionals? Where are the scientists? Where are the teachers? Where are the medical doctors? What the heck are they doing? They're sleeping. They're going along. They're being compliant. They're following directives, and they've stopped having professional independence, and they're not even asking for it. They're just building their careers and trying to fit in within the institution. So this, to me, the degree to which this has happened and the degree to which that is true today, I find absolutely shocking. In my relatively short life, I've never seen anything like this before. So that is a real flag that something is wrong. The other thing that's shocking is the reach that UN type organizations have, like the World Health Organization. It's incredible the amount of influence and reach and their ability to coordinate all of the institutions, even the mayors of cities across the world. The way that they're able to coordinate that and basically an orchestra director able to say what we should do, how we should think, how we should react, what kind of policies we should have. The degree to which that has happened is absolutely stunning, and that is part of this phenomenon of globalization, where money interests are funding entire UN sectors through non-government organizations that have been given special rights at the UN. This happened in the early 90s in conjunction with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So I've studied the geopolitics of that. I'm not going to get into it because it's too complicated right now. It would make it too long. But the thing is, there is no way that these unelected bodies should have this kind of global influence on nations. And that it is shocking the degree to which that is true nowadays. The other thing that I find shocking, coming down to a smaller scale, is the degree to which individual persons have developed personality frailty and are susceptible to fear. Now, that is a massive cooperative phenomenon. Individuals themselves have a stronger fear nowadays than they did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's easier to excite in them and make them susceptible to having fear about personal danger to a much higher degree than before. Irrational fear, you just have to tell them that there's a danger, and they react with fear. Fear of being Another fear that individuals have these days to an exaggerated extent is the fear of being excluded or mobbed. In other words, the fear of saying something that might be out of place. This goes along with the phenomenon of political correctness. So there's a great fear in individuals of that, of being excluded. There's also a great need in individuals to show, because of the first 2 points, there's a great need to show their virtue and their compliance. They want to demonstrate compliance. They want to demonstrate virtue. They want to express it. So this is a personality trend in individuals, which has been increasing and is now at a very high degree. And I think it took decades to achieve this degree of individual malleability, individual insecurity with regards to believing what you see, making up your own mind, being intellectually independent, opposing views and being prepared to argue them and not agree, and being prepared to have arguments even if it's uncomfortable. All of these traits that are normal, essential traits in a society of interacting individuals have been kind of quashed away from individuals. And this has happened largely through the school system. So the institutions have been cooperating in this, and through the propaganda, obviously, which is continuous. But I think another big reason is that more and more our reality is seen through the screen of our computers and our iPhones and so on, so that what is reality is what comes to us through those electronic venues versus meeting people, exchanging stories with them, exchanging their experiences, confronting whether or not what they say is true directly through personal contacts. That has diminished as a way of getting reliable information, and it has been replaced by these electronic means, which are so easy to manipulate by powerful interests. That's the problem. Even if there's freedom for some people to give their opinions on the internet, it's swamped by the establishment propaganda. So I think those are some of the mechanisms for this loss of individuality. Another thing that I find shocking these days, and I'm going to argue that these problems are greater now than they were 20 or 30 years ago. It wasn't this, I sincerely believe that it was not like this after the Second World War in the 50s and 60s and 70s. It was not this bad. It was nothing like this. And I think one can objectively demonstrate that it's gotten worse. So the other thing is and this is shocking also, the degree to which governments are captured by these international institutions, captured by influential groups, captured by special interests, corporations, and so on. The degree to which the governments themselves are thoughtless. They don't rely on in-house expertise. They don't rely on developing in-house expertise and having strong scientific teams of independent thinkers that then can give them counsel. They've stopped relying on that. They've become thoughtless, and they are extraordinarily reckless. That is just shocking. It is so reckless to be launching into this huge social experiment with regards to COVID. It's so irresponsible. So they're willing to go along with these massive social experiments. They're willing to follow globalist forces and globalist messaging, which are also, these same globalist forces control the media, the major, most influential media. So they're willing to go along with what the media says because that's the memo that they get, just like everyone else. They're willing to do all of this, our governments now, but there's a catch. They're willing to do it provided that public opinion goes along with it, mostly goes along with it. Okay? That's the control on governments, is they don't dare have a revolt. They don't dare people completely get angry with them, want to vote them out and elect some government they've never seen before, and change things around completely. They're worried about that. They don't want to be thrown out of office and have everyone not cooperate whatsoever. So they're willing to go along as long as they see that the media are dragging us along in terms of public opinion. So if the majority of people have a public opinion that they want to be secured in their health by these measures, then the governments feel they can do this and they can push it, and they can be aggressive and punish the ones that don't go along because they're a minority of people, and the majority will cheer the government on when they get aggressive like this. So this is one of the conditions they need, is that we go along. A good example of that is the example of Australia. Australia is known to be one of the most vicious police states during COVID. And we've seen the videos. It's very true. The Australian police are just wild. They're crazy. And one of the reasons, if you look at the opinion poll data, Australia in the Western world um, is the country that has the greatest degree of agreeing with the idea that vaccines are a good idea and that we should all be vaccinated. Okay? So it's not an accident that there is this public opinion that really goes along with these health concerns in Australia, and the police can be very vicious against the outliers, if you like, the people who don't agree, because they're in such a minority, and they're not going to lose public opinion by doing this. So, but still, the fact that governments are willing to do this, are willing to sacrifice a vocal part of the population, that and be very aggressive with them and push these massive social experiments, is shocking. It's shocking. I've never seen anything like it before. None of us have, I don't think. The other thing that I find very surprising, and that it's shocking even, is the degree. I'm still going through this list of the shocking things that I see in present society before I try to explain how we got there. The degree to which individuals and governments and everybody has trust in the medical establishment, has belief that actually we believe that the medical establishment is actually doing more good than harm, and is actually helping us more than they might harm us. We believe that firmly. And that belief is contrary to evidence. I mean, the medical treatments and medical prescriptions and so on are a leading cause of death, straight up. Never mind the harm that they cause. If you just look at deaths, they're the third leading cause of death. This is admitted by all the experts in the field. This is not a controversial point. Medicine is the third leading cause of death in Western countries. It's medicine itself is not evidence-based. The biggest experts have said it, even recently again. There is not good evidence for these aggressive treatments that are being prescribed. There's usually not good, high quality, policy grade, treatment grade evidence available. They just do it. They do it on the basis of second-rate evidence. And more within medicine, they don't do comparative studies. They don't do trials where you compare not giving the treatment to giving the treatment. And the reason they don't is because they argue that it would be unethical within the trial to not give the treatment to some of the subjects. I mean, that's how absurd it is. We don't know how effective the treatment is. It's marginally effective. We want to do a study that tests this, and it's starting to become unethical to not give the treatment to some people to find out if it's an effective treatment. That's the level of crazy that we're at now. So I find it very shocking that the medical establishment has captured us to this degree. There are great doctors. There are wonderful doctors. There are whistleblower doctors. There are, there's a minority of professionals that are really fighting against this craziness, but it's still shocking the degree to which medicine as a whole operates, and that we just tend to go along. Those things that I just enumerated are extreme at the moment. These are extreme characteristics of our society. They're huge signals that something has gone wrong. And so now I move into the second point that I wanted to make. How did we get here? Well, I think that there's a word that has to be used, and it's a word that people don't like to say sometimes, but this very important word is fascism. Fascism is a very real social phenomenon. All societies are dominance hierarchies, and influential people that are at the top tend to want more and be more assured of their continued control, and they have more influence on the laws and policies. And so there is a gradual progression in society, a steady, slow march towards an extreme state, which is fascism. And that has occurred in every society that is organized, that is large enough. There are balancing forces against that steady march toward fascism, and they are based on resistance. They are based on the individuals not wanting to go along and on resisting it. But there is this steady march. It's a very real phenomenon. And we're very fortunate to have some high-level science that has been done on this phenomenon very recently. Last year in 2019, Joseph Hickey and his supervisor at the time, Professor Davidson, wrote a paper that's entitled Self-Organization and Time Stability of Social Hierarchies. This is a fundamental paper written by two physicists who looked at a fundamental theory where you can try to calculate how and when a society is stable, and where you can see this slow march to an extreme state of a very sharp hierarchy, which can be called totalitarianism or fascism. So they made a theoretical model that was based on this very simple idea that a society is made up of individuals that interact. They basically interact and they battle for status and for relative position, because that is our nature as social animals. And in these battles, whether you're battling City Hall or someone at work and so on, in these battles, there are two basic parameters that are important. One is, how violent is the interaction? How big is the punishment if you lose an interaction or a fight? Okay, so in a state like ours, it might be, how big is the fine that you have to pay if the police decide to charge you, right? That would be how violent the society is. And the other parameter is, how authoritarian is a society? And that means if you're fighting someone that has more power than you, more status than you, like if you're fighting City Hall, what is the probability that you can actually win sometimes? Is it 100% that you're going to lose all the time? Or if it's less authoritarian, sometimes you'll win. So there is the degree of authoritarian nature in the society and the degree of violence in the society. These are two parameters that turn out to control how quickly we evolve towards a fascist state. So that is kind of my theoretical social theory understanding of how we got here. We've allowed the society to become more violent and more authoritarian. We don't have the same features that we used to have to protect our rights and to be able to have our rights, because the judges are captured by the same system that we described, in the same way that the politicians are captured, and so on. So there's this progressive structural changes in the society and capture that makes it such that you'll evolve more quickly towards this extreme state until you can roll it back by fighting back, basically. So that may not be very encouraging, but that's how I understand this broad societal process. And so the final part of my presentation is, well, what can we do about it? And I'm going to give you a personal view about what we can do about it, and it's based on a book that I wrote in 2012. So a lot of the ideas, the background of what I'm about to say is in that book. The book is entitled Hierarchy, there's that word again, Hierarchy and Free Expression in the Fight Against Racism. In the book, the fight against racism represents the fight against all kinds of injustices or discriminations that can be power-based and so on. So that's in that book. I try to explain how you fight this, how you make sure that you don't just run off to a totalitarian state. And I'm going to tell you what I think I discovered through my research and thinking and reading about the many people in history have expressed their views on this. So I'll summarize it as follows. If we're going to change this thing, at its core, you need something very essential. You need an element that has to be there. And that element is the individual has to be prepared to fight back. How the individual decides to do something and whether or not they engage and are willing to take risk, the degree to which individuals themselves are not just compliant, that's the key. You need that element. So basically what that means for us as persons in this struggle, whether it's for vaccine choice or anything else, what it means is that each person has to do what they can by the means that they have. In other words, there's no silver bullet, no perfect or good organizer is going to solve everything. No whistleblowing scientist is going to solve everything. No new politician that is reasonable and starts a movement by himself or herself are going to change anything. You need more than that. Those people are just part of this network, but in that network, you need to have individuals that are dedicated to pushing back. So all of us have to push back however we can using our abilities, and we have to trust our knowledge, and we have to keep learning, and we have to evaluate our thinking and our picture and evaluate whether our tactics are working or not. And so what that means is you do what you can. For example, if masks bother you, you consider the circumstances where you might confront the system by not wearing the mask and see what happens and see if it's worth that effort in the particular circumstances where you try to do it, and then learn from that and so on. So each person does what they can, whether it's in their schools, at their work, in shopping, and so on. And the important element of doing what you can, because it can be dangerous to have these actions, the very important thing that you have to do is make sure that you're not isolated and that they cannot eliminate you easily. So that's why we need groups. That's why we need organization. That's why we need social media. That's why we need the networks. We have to be part of groups. So part of your pushing back has to be connecting to others and making sure that you have the security of many people. But without the individual doing it, that security in itself is not going to do it. It's not going to be successful. That's the lesson that we need to learn and that we have forgotten. They have taken that lesson away from us. We used to know this in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We've forgotten it. We think that it's enough to just organize and have a good message and to get the message out and to give good information and to do good studies and then convey them. It's not enough. All of those steps are support, but the essential ingredient that's often missing is the individuals themselves willing to put themselves out there, willing to push, willing to go and meet the teacher or the principal and explain to them that they feel that these masks are harming your children and why. Willing to do all those extra efforts and push as far as you can that you think it's effective. Not too far that you alienate everybody in your environment. You get isolated and you get taken out. But as far as you can, that you have an influence and you start to, that influence is starting to gain because you have many actions and it's doing that. So you see, that's the nature of my message, is that without individuals being prepared to do this within our networks, we're not going to be able to slowly crawl back to a more democratic, fight back. And in all of this also, you have to do it respectfully. You have to keep your dignity. You have to keep your principles, and you don't waste energy fighting with someone who's just not going to agree in the particular circumstances. You just take another tactic and do everything you can without wasting your time trying to look for a savior or look for a perfect magic bullet of information. If I can only explain it really well, then they'll understand. No, they won't. They don't want to understand. They're building their careers by not understanding, and they're following orders, and that's not going to do it. So it's the pushback that's going to do it. That's my message for what we can do. And everyone does what they can. So I'd be happy to answer some questions now if there are any follow-up questions. But that's the essence of what I was going to tell you about, those three main